having the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So just right there, it's unlawful. They can't just go and look at your information just because they feel like it. Like there's no probable cause, they can't do that. They need a warrant. And so this clearly violates the Fourth Amendment. And the Patriot Act was a knee-jerk reaction to the attacks on 9/11. And obviously the people had a right to be scared. Something that had never happened before had just happened, and like everybody was freaking out. So the government felt like they needed to do something, and just because of these attacks, they were able to put this act into motion. And not only is this a problem for the American citizens, but according to OccupyTheory.org, not only does the Patriot Act allocate precious resources on tracking citizens of America during a time period when government spending has been roundly criticized, but the Patriot Act also allows for the tracking of United States citizens who decided to move overseas, and this is considered to be a gross misuse of government funds. And this isn't even the end of it. According to a section in the Act, as pointed out by connectfundus.org, it's actually Title IV, there is an immigration provision that allows the Attorney General to have an illegal alien detained indefinitely if the former suspects the latter will be able to instigate a terrorist attack. So basically this just gives the Attorney General the right to put anyone in jail that he believes to be suspicious. And that doesn't sound very much like a republic to me, that sounds like a dictatorship. And something incredibly scary and wrong was done to a college freshman, so just like you guys, A.J. Brown, who, according to Appalachian State University, was approached, questioned, and interrogated without probable cause of any criminal activity simply for engaging in political speech protected by the Constitution. Brown was approached by federal agents in her dorm room after being accused of having anti-American materials in her room. And the materials turned out to be a poster that expressed opposition to the death penalty and also depicted President George Bush's image. And these kinds of things are only the tip of the iceberg. According to an infographic on ACLU.org, 192,499 national security letters were sent out between 2003 and 2006 because of information found due to the use of the Patriot Act, which led to only one terror-related conviction. So they sent out all of these national security letters because of information that they found, and they only convicted one person. It's supposedly the government implemented the act, which allows them to collect data and information from anyone that they want, and it's supposed to combat terrorism. And in the 3 most fearful years after 9/11, they only made one terror-related conviction. And there have already been Supreme Court cases that have deemed parts of the act unconstitutional. Take ACLU versus Clapper, for example. After the Edward Snowden information leak, the ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, took it upon themselves to sue the director of the NSA, James Clapper, citing that Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which allows bulk data collection from American citizens, is unlawful. The court ruled in favor of the ACLU, and Jamil Jafar of JustSecurity.org stated, "The ruling means that even if Congress reauthorizes Section 215 by June 1st, the government will have to discontinue bulk collection under that provision unless Congress adds language expressly authorizing bulk collection." Also, 2 provisions of the Patriot Act were ruled unconstitutional in the case of Mayfield versus United States. This had to do with the 2004 Madrid train bombings, in which they found a latent fingerprint that they concluded out of 20 possible suspects matched one Brandon Mayfield, a Muslim man from Oregon. However, they did not take into account that the Spanish government also ran some tests, and they found that his fingerprint had over 20 dissimilarities with the fingerprint that they found on the detonator. And the FBI didn't care, and according to FindLaw.com, began to watch Mayfield and follow him and members of his family when they traveled to and from the mosque, Mayfield's law office, the children's schools, and other family activities. The FBI also appealed to the Foreign Intelligence Security Court for authorization to place electronic listening devices in the shared and intimate rooms of Mayfield's family home. And they searched the home while nobody was there, obtained private and protected information about the Mayfields from third parties, searched Mayfield's law offices, and placed wiretaps on his office and home phones. Mayfield was in fact arrested, but the next day, the true culprit, whose fingerprint actually matched, was found, and it was a Spanish man from Spain, and Mayfield was released. And soon after, he filed suit against the FBI and won, with NBC News reporting that U.S. Judge Ann Aiken ruled that the Patriot Act, quote, permits the executive branch of government to conduct surveillance and searches of American citizens without satisfying the probable cause requirements of the Fourth Amendment. And these are just two examples of the fight being taken against the Patriot Act. It's unconstitutional, and it should be repealed. It does more harm than good, and there isn't any evidence to prove that it has helped extensively on preventing terror attacks.
Alright, so first, let me tell you what the USA Patriot Act even stands for. It stands for Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. So in summation, the act was put into place following the terrorist attacks of 9/11 in 2001. And the act was created just to do what its acronym stands for, which is to give the government the tools it needs to identify terrorists and obstruct them from causing harm to Americans everywhere. So obviously I'm for not repealing the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act now gives FBI officials, after it's put into place, the use of investigation tools that have been available to police for the 9/11 attack took place. And these tools were used to fight against organized crime and drug dealers. And now they're actually being put to better use against more high-profile threats. So, according to then Senator Joe Biden, the FBI could get a wiretap to investigate the mafia, but could not get one to investigate terrorists. To put it bluntly, that was crazy. What's good for the mob should be good for terrorists. And that was from the U.S. Department of Justice website. So it only makes sense to have the FBI use the most high-tech equipment for their investigations to catch the most high-profile threats, right? Well, as I mentioned before, the equipment is approved by a court. Likewise, to even investigate a lone wolf suspect, the FBI officials must present evidence to a court to have the investigation approved. And this is one of the ways where the investigative power of the government can be controlled and limited so that's not too overreaching. However, some feel the act is still unconstitutional. So, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects citizens against searches and seizures in their own home. Police cannot just walk up to the door, invite themselves in, and start going through people's stuff. So in the same way, the Patriot Act allows FBI officials to do the same thing for more high-profile targets. So FBI officials need to appear before the Foreign International Surveillance Court, the FISC, and provide probable cause to earn the use of wiretaps and/or physical searches in another person's home. And according to the Constitutional Rights Foundation, Section 215 of the Act permits the FBI to go before the FISC for an order to search for any tangible things connected to a terrorism suspect. Any tangible things could mean a book, a poster, a laptop, or other incriminating evidence. In addition, Section 215 has been the most controversial part of the Patriot Act. This is something that's been well known for a long time. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, Section 215 allows the government to obtain secret court orders requiring third parties, such as telephone companies like Verizon, to hand over all records that may include any tangible things that are deemed relevant to an international terrorism plot or plan. So this means that the government and the NSA have access to metadata from our everyday phone calls. Metadata includes who you called, when you called them, how long you called them, where you called them, and how many times you called them in a certain time period. And this may come as something that seems startling or uncomfortable for most, that the government is listening in on our phone calls and hearing about everyday business. And according to Katerina Ulova from Keen EDU, the Patriot Act breaches the First Amendment, which declares our rights to freedom, expression, speech, and information. Well, what she presents is a view that many Americans share about the act being unconstitutional. However, nothing about the act itself limits the people's civil liberties. Who here has ever felt that they couldn't say what they wanted to say on the phone because of worry that the government was listening? Nobody. So this only further supports that people can still just say whatever they want, and it's in the best interest for the American people. Personally, I wouldn't care if the government was listening in on me talking to my grandmother about a vacation or talking to my buddies about some explicit illegal things that may have happened over the weekend, because it's in the best interest of the American people as a whole. But still this uncomfortable feeling that pays the price of having the country be actively monitored and protected against terrorism, which I feel like is a price that I personally am willing to pay and many others are. According to Thomas Anderson of the Burlington Free Press, as of May 5th, 2004, the Department of Justice has charged 310 defendants with criminal offenses as a result of terrorism investigations since the attacks of September 11, 2001, and 179 of those defendants have already been convicted. So, in the spring of 2015, a little over a year ago, Congress was gearing up to vote on reform for the Patriot Act. The reform could include revisions to the controversial Section 215, which forces or kind of just makes Verizon and other large call services to hand over all their metadata on citizens. And according to Jeremy Diamond of CNN, the reform bill would keep the government from collecting telephone metadata of millions of Americans. Instead of requiring the NSA to get the warrant from the Foreign International Surveillance Court to collect data on the specific individual from telecommunication companies. And then, by June 2nd, 2015, the reform was passed by both Congress and the Senate, 338 to 88 and 67 to 32 respectively. This shows that even Congress has overwhelming support for the Patriot Act. That same day, President Obama signed into law the now USA Freedom Act. It's no longer called the Patriot Act. And according to the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee and Chairman Bob Goodlatte. So the Freedom Act now prohibits bulk collection of all records under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. In addition, the prohibition of the bulk collection is supported by prohibiting large-scale, indiscriminate collection like all records from a city, state, or zip code. So no longer can they collect all this information from just anybody in anywhere, unless they're a high-profile target that they have already been approved by a court of law to investigate. So now the Freedom Act now puts less restrictions to the people's own civil liberties. So why repeal it now? Well, it sometimes may seem intrusive or overpowering of the government. The Freedom Act provides the American people with the greatest protection and obstruction against acts of terrorism. We all hope to live in a safer country, and if the price to pay is the government monitoring my phone calls to my grandma and our business from time to time, then so be it. Because you have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide.
Okay. Well, to quote our great president-elect, Jacob, you're wrong. You argued that the Patriot Act is in the best interest of citizens and that people don't have anything to fear if they don't have anything to hide. That doesn't change the fact that the Act completely violates the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. It's in the Bill of Rights. When they created our country, it's protected against unlawful search and seizure. You need a warrant. You need probable cause. And even just going back to the argument that I already presented with Mayfield versus United States, he was one of 20 suspects. They concluded that it was his fingerprint. They didn't care about any other tests that they did. They just cared about the one that they ran. And they were going and following him and wiretapping his phones and searching his home while nobody was there. And it's just ridiculous. And it doesn't matter that your information isn't being widely broadcasted to the entire country, or the government's still taking your privacy into their own hands.
Done.
Oh, that's it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So going back to the whole case with the man from Oregon and everything, and the train incident in Madrid, as you said, the FBI would not just pull a name out of a hat like, oh, this seems likely. So they had reason to give an investigation, and that was approved by a court of law, that some part of his fingerprint did match the suspect that they were investigating. So there was reason to investigate him. And now, long term, nothing bad has happened to him. Simply just some investigation business that may have lasted a little while. Other than that, while you said that they didn't accept any other data, the other data that Spain's government ran may have not been available by the time they were already investigating this other man. So, yes.
Okay, so then we'll hear Kate. Position 2.